Hey guys, I wanted to record a quick video to show you how to build an embeddable dashboard using Embeddable. Embeddable is basically a developer toolkit for building in-app analytics or customer-facing analytics into your app. And the quite unique thing about it is that every single component and chart that makes up your dashboard are basically React.js components, which means that you can use any charting library like, any component library like. You can use your existing buttons from your own platform, which means the end result looks and feels like like your own platform. And so yeah, we'll dig into that today and show you how easy it is to do that. So I'll head over to our handbook, and interestingly, the first thing that happens when you want to use Embeddable is, if we go to getting started, is it'll ask you to clone, for example, a sample repo to get started. So let's do that. I'll head over, I'll clone the kind of starter repo here. And if we actually just open up Sublime so we can see what's inside, what you'll notice is it's just, it's got your usual setup that you're probably used to. Package.json just includes the kind of standard dependencies from our library that just include here. And it also includes some build scripts, which we'll use throughout this video. The other thing I want to point out is that you'll notice here that there's basically two things. So there's some components. I've got here three examples which we'll play with, but you can easily add more components just by adding them using React. And then we also have some data models, which basically tells Embeddable how to get data from your database. And we'll look at examples of a component and an example of a model during this video. So let's head back over here, and let's just follow the instructions. So usual, npm install the dependencies. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to run npm run build, which will actually install everything that we've built, our components, etc. And then the thing we need to do now is we need to actually push them to the platform. So this allows, you can use this as part of your kind of CI/CD in order to, whenever you're making changes to your components, you can just push them up to the platform. Just put in a random email in here. Just need to grab an API key. So where's the link here? And I can grab my API key here. Let's just try that. Right, so now what I've done is I've basically taken my local repository, which is here, and any changes, and I've built and pushed those to the platform. Now the platform is our kind of no-code builder. So this is what you see here. So if I click Create New Embeddable, basically kind of dashboards, we call them Embeddables, you end up in our nice no-code environment here. This white box is the canvas. The canvas is where you build out your dashboard. You can see here my three components. If you remember, those are the three components that we've defined in our code repo. And let's start by adding, for example, hello world. So hello world is going to ask me for a title and a body. Hello world. And if I click save, what you'll notice is that I can now kind of move that around and add that to my canvas wherever I like. The important part here is that what's rendered here is actually just React.js that's telling us what to render. So let's actually look at that as an example. So I'll go to my hello world, I'll go to the React, and what you should hopefully notice is that everything here is just completely standard React. It's got some input props, title and body, and then it's rendering some HTML, H1 and a P tag, which is literally just rendering what's going on here. So the important thing is if you wanted to use any library you can imagine to whether it be charting libraries or maps or any really cool stuff, all you do is you add it to your package.json and then use it in here. So the important part is if it can be done in React, it can be done in Embeddable. But yeah, the interesting part is how do you tell Embeddable that this component needs to appear here? And also how do you tell it that it should require these kind of inputs? The way you do that is using this companion file here. And you'll notice that it has a function called define component, which comes from our library. That just tells Embeddable that it should be a component over here. And then the next bit that's important is we're defining these inputs. So you can see I've got a title and a body. And what that means is that it's going to ask for a title and a body whenever somebody wants to use that component. And I've defined them as type string here. Type string just tells Embeddable, hey, ask for a string input, but you can imagine if you ask for a Boolean or a date time or anything else, or you can even define your own custom types. It will define different inputs that you can provide for rendering this thing. And then the final thing you need to do is then tell Embeddable, right, once these values are input, how do they then get passed to the component? That's super simple. We do it here. So we're saying that the inputs, like title and body, map onto, in this case, just one-to-one title and body, which means that the values then get passed in as title and body here in your render. So this is a super simple example. If you want to have a look later at this repository, there's lots of kind of more interesting examples as well. Cool, so that's basically how it works behind the scenes, and that means you end up with a nice reusable component where you can provide different inputs and reuse it multiple times. But let's look at something more interesting. We're going to add a pie chart, and a pie chart is interesting not just because it's visually more interesting, but also because it's going to load data from our database. This particular workspace is already connected to a sample Postgres database that I've set up. So we don't need to do that step, but I can show you how this works. So if I click pie chart, again, you're going to notice it's going to ask me for a bunch of inputs, but they're slightly more interesting inputs this time. And the first one it asks for is a data set. And data sets in Embeddable are basically how we get data from the database. So I'm just going to head over here to this tab, and you'll notice I can define a data set. So let's create one called customer data. And you'll notice I've got my 3 models that I can use: customers, orders, and products. These obviously map out with these models here, which we'll take a look at in a second. Behind the scenes, we're using something called CubeDev, used to be called Cube.js. You might be familiar with it. It's really nice. It basically allows you to use SQL in order to map basically a data model onto your database, whichever database you're using. We'll show you examples of this. So customer data set coming from the customer data model, and now we've got this data set here. So we'll go back to our pie chart, and I'm going to choose the customer data to populate my chart. By choosing this, instantly what's available is a bunch of things to slice by. So I'm going to choose country, and I'm also going to choose number of customers. So now it's going to show basically in the pie chart number of customers by country. I click save, and yeah, hopefully what we'll see is a nice chart. I'm using chart.js in this case, but you could use any charting library you like for rendering this. Cool, so let's quickly look at where that kind of data came from. Okay, so the Postgres database, which I've set up for this, just so you have an idea of what that looks like, it's basically a very simple schema. It's got 3 tables: customers, orders, and products, and there's some foreign keys that kind of connect these together. And if we look at, for example, the customers table, just to see what that looks like, you can see it's got primary key, email, it's got some data, and it's got a country. But what we need to do is we need to tell Embeddable that this table exists, and how do we get access to the data, what kind of columns are available. And we do that using the data modeling. So if I head back to the code and I head back to my models here, and I head to my customers one, what you'll notice is that we've defined a customers model, and we've just said it comes from the customers table inside the public schema. That's the simplest way. If you're just mapping it directly to a table, this is just the easiest way to do it. However, often data is a little bit more complex than that. And so what you can actually do is you can define this thing we call, you're using SQL, and I've got 3 lines of SQL here. This could easily be 100, depending on how you want to define the customer's data model, given your particular database. And what I'm actually doing as well here is I'm doing what we call row-level security, where I might, for example, pass in a user ID. And this allows me to dynamically basically load different sets of data depending on the customer. So what that means is my dashboard, where's it gone? My dashboard here. I can actually show it in one way for example, customer 1, but some other customer will see it, a different slice of the data. So everybody's only seeing the data that they're, allowed to see, basically. You can do a lot of kind of control there. Cool. But then, yeah, this is where the kind of power comes in. You define these things called dimensions and measures. Dimensions you can think of as like your kind of virtual columns. So I'm saying there's an email dimension, which basically is going to take data from the email column. or I might do something a bit more interesting like define a full name dimension, which is actually the concatenation of the first name and last name from my database. The important part here is wherever it says SQL, this is the SQL of your database. So in this case, it's Postgres syntax, but if you're using BigQuery or Snowflake or whatever you're using, you just use the syntax there, and that means you get the full power of the database you're using. You can use window functions, you can use JSON functions, you can use external like extensions, etc., etc. Anyway, all of these dimensions then automatically, appear here. You can see I've got my email, my country. These are all the ones that have been defined here. And so if later we add more dimensions, they automatically then become available as part of the UI, which is just super, super nice. And then the other thing we define is these things called measures. Measures are more kind of your aggregate calculations, so that your counts, your sums, your max, your mins, averages, that kind of thing. As in maybe a better example, I might have a measure called price, and price is the sum of the price USD column divided by 100 plus tax column or whatever. Okay, and the nice thing here is that then wherever price is used together with any other dimension, this basically will be the kind of single source of truth of how that's calculated. And if that later changes, you just change it in one place, and that will propagate to all your kind of embeddable dashboards, which is really nice. And you can see those measures automatically then appear here. Okay, cool. So that's how we load data. But yeah, let's do something more fun. Let's add a bit of interactivity. So I'm going to add a text input here, and I'm going to call it my text input. Click save. And so now I've got a text input on my canvas. If I head over to preview mode, which allows me to kind of see and play with it, I can type in here, and at the moment it doesn't do anything, and that's just because we haven't set up the interactivity, but I'll show you how we can do that now. So let's say, for example, we want to type in this box and it should change the title of this hello world component. The way we do that is we use something we call variables. So I'll create a variable of type text, my text variable, and I'll give it value hello big world. Click save. Right, so I've got a variable here with value hello big world, and now for my component here, I'm going to edit that, and I'm going to say, instead of hard coding the title to hello, I'm going to link a variable, and I'm going to choose this variable, and that means the title now is going to be set by this value here. So you can see now hello big world comes from that variable. But what we want to do is we want this text input to control it. So we're actually going to have this text input control that variable. And that's, again, easy to do. Just click edit, add an interaction, and I'm going to say when there's a change event, i.e. when the value here changes, I'm going to set a variable. I'm going to set this variable, and I'm going to use the value. So the value is the value that's typed in here. And what that means is when I type in this box, it's going to update this variable, which in turn should update the title that we see here. Let's try that out. Head over to preview mode, and I'll say, how are you? And you can see it's updated here. And you can even see this is our kind of debugging console. You can see the old value was hello big world, and the new value was kind of how are you? Okay, but let's do something even more interesting. Let's have the text input filter the data that's actually going to be shown in this particular chart. And obviously this is a text input. The same kind of concepts that we're showing here apply if you had a date picker or a button, or even if you were clicking a slice on a pie, and I'll show you how that works. So let's say, so this chart here, if you remember, it's basically coming from our dataset, our customer data dataset, which is defined here. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, our data set, if I open it, we're actually going to not just have it come from all the data from customers, we're actually going to filter it so that the country has to contain, and I'll choose my text variable. So now it's going to use the value of this to filter the country. If I click save, firstly, you'll notice it shows no data. This is literally just because you can see here there was a country, there's no country called hello big world. So we'll clear that out. So now it shows all the data. So now what should happen is I type in this box, it updates the variable, which updates the data set, which filters the data here. Okay, so let's try that out. So if I type United, you can see it's filtered the data here. And you can even see here that it's actually, I think the filters over here somewhere is automatically added, like a filter by country, and you can see it's passed in United, so you can see the SQL that's being run as well as part of this kind of console. Nice. Cool. So yeah, we've built a kind of interactive dashboard, but yeah, that's not useful until it's actually embedded in our website. So let's show you how easy it is to then embed a dashboard. So whenever you make changes to a dashboard, you literally, click publish, and it will automatically publish those changes to your website, and I'll show that in a second. If you're making changes to your codes, let's say I go into my pie chart. Here, maybe for example, I change the colors or the fonts or whatever. Again, all I do to make those changes is I run the command. I build it and then I push it, and encourage people to do that via CI/CD. So you can kind of make the changes and they automatically get pushed to the platform. And you can see the different kind of code versions that are in here. You can jump back and forth between them. Cool. So anyway, we make changes to the dashboard, and whenever we're happy with it, we click publish to make that go live. So yeah, so let's do exactly that. So I click here, and I'm going to do my first publish, which will make that go live. And what it's going to do is going to give me these two things, an API key and an embeddable ID. So obviously, I don't have a proper app to show this, but I'm just going to show you on localhost. So if we head over here, what you can see is I've got a script called embedding preview. Yeah, I'll move my face out of the way. And it just basically takes the API key and embeddable ID. This is just for kind of testing the embedding, just so I can show you how that works. So I'll copy the API key, copy the embeddable ID, save those. If I head back to my terminal, move my face again, and we're just going to run, where's it gone? I think it's in here, yeah. So, and you can see now it's listening on port 8080. So we'll head over there, and if we're lucky, yeah, you can see it's done here. I can interact with it. You can kind of change it. And then in the actual dashboard itself, if I make some changes, I don't know, I move this over here, move this over here, I don't know, move stuff around a little bit, and I click publish again, what you'll notice is that in my dashboard, the changes are then live for your customers. But how does it actually work behind the scenes? So the way it works behind the scenes, if I go to view page source, you can literally see it's just, I don't know if this is big enough for you, but this kind of nice little snippet of HTML. So it's just a snippet of HTML that then renders it. We don't use iframes, it uses a web component and embeds as part of your DOM, so it's super nice and fast. The only thing you need to do is request this thing called a security token, which basically tells Embeddable securely what dashboard to load and how to, for example, filter the data so that it's for your particular customer. People usually ask me how that works, so I'm going to show you. If I head back to the handbook and we go to embedding and embeddable, we can see here, basically to embed it is that small HTML snippet, or if you're using, for example, React, you can do something like this in your app, and you just need to pass in our security token. But the token you get from you have to do this via your server side for security reasons. You basically ask for security. So every time a user wants to see a dashboard, you just ask for a new security token. You use the API key that I showed you how to grab. You use the embeddable ID, which I also showed you how to grab. Maybe just to show you again. Here, API key and embeddable ID. And where were we? We were here. But yeah, this is kind of where the power comes in. The other thing you do then is you pass in this thing called a security context. And a security context is literally just an arbitrary JavaScript or JSON object, like key value pairs. So in this case, I've passed in user ID and regions, but you could pass in customer ID or whatever makes sense for you and your business. And whatever these values are, they then become available in the data models, which we looked at earlier. So you can see I've got my orders model, which comes from the orders table and is filtered to the user ID. It comes from that user ID, which is passed in here. And so you can just really nicely, fully control dynamically for every user who visits the dashboard what they should see. Cool. I hope that was helpful. Any questions? Reach out.